Hi everyone. So my name's Melissa, and I just wanted to share, I guess, a part of my journey that I'm going on at the moment. Part of my life story, I guess. And I was I was a child of a mentally ill parent, and that's something that I'm only just now really coming to terms with what that means and how that's impacted my life. So my mum was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and I think it's like depression a bit as well, when I was about 4 or 5, around about that age. Um, yeah, it's I don't remember it happening, but all I know is that my childhood and most of my life has been very difficult because of it. Um, if you don't know much about schizophrenia, basically the way that my mum had it was that um, it's like she'd be having a conversation with you, and in that same conversation, she'd just kind of stop, and it would be like in her mind, she's just having like say 3 or 4 other conversations with people that only existed to her, not to you. So she'd be talking to you kind of like I am now, and then I don't know where she'd just stop, and then she'd turn, and it's like the voices in her head telling her things. And when you kind of click your fingers and say, "Hey, mum, what are you doing?" And she'd kind of come back into reality as you were aware of it. So it sounds very like, okay, that's kind of crazy, but it's, I guess, my normal, or what I knew as normal. And it was also kind of terrifying because when you have a parent in this kind of mental state, and she would just, it's like flicking a switch. You never knew when she was going to change. And it was like physically she looked like my mother, and I recognized her as such. But then something would just change. There'd be some kind of trigger for her, and then she just starts saying things, and just like it's like a completely different person had just inhabited my mom, and you kind of just it didn't make sense, especially as a little kid. And so I don't remember a great deal about my early years. I mean, I know a lot of it was just like, I think mum was probably at her worst up till I was about, I'm gonna say high school. And in some ways I'm grateful that I grew up with it rather than finding out about it, as a, like, when I became a teenager, or even now in my 20s, because I don't know how I would have been able to cope with her gradually becoming that, as opposed to when you grow up with something, it's just normal. Like when you grow up in a family where one of your parents is an alcoholic or a drug addict, or there's always some kind of weird, like what you would think is normal, but when you compare it to other people's lives, it's like, this is actually really, really weird. But you just understand it in a way, because it's just like, that's just how your life is. So for me, that's kind of what my normal was. It was, going to church on a Sunday, and everyone, being all Pleasantville and whatever. Then when you come home, mum would either be resting because the medication that she had to take, so she wouldn't be constantly, as my dad would say, off the planet. She was kind of terrifying to be around when she was having a off day. And when things were okay, it's like she could be the nicest person, and everyone that remembers her now is just like, that's how they remember her. They're like, she's just such a lovely lady, and she's just such a warm, caring person, and all this stuff. And I'm not like, I would never say that she wasn't those things, because on her good days she was like that. And I overall, like, am grateful for the times that she was completely 100%, a dedicated mother, and the kind of mother that everyone would probably dream of having. But then my reality was, she was like that maybe 15, 20% probably a bit of a stretch, more 15% of the time. And the rest of the time it was just like, it's like having a parent with the mentality of, say, a 5-year-old, and you're looking at this person going, you're meant to be the parent, not me. And that's probably been one of the hardest things for me to try and comprehend, particularly, you know, growing up in a really relatively small religious environment, and no one at church really knew anything about Mum's condition. The church that I grew up at anyway, she grew up at a different location church, and they were kind of aware of her family history because my uncle also is, I'm going to say a lot more schizophrenic, but I think he's got a different type of it, which means his is definitely more severe, and you can tell straight away. Whereas with Mum, she was able to convince people that she was completely fine, to the point where, you know, it was only at her funeral in 2015 when my dad and I got up and said, you know, and I started off saying, you know, what a lot of people didn't know was, you know, she was diagnosed with this condition, this illness when I was like 4 or 5. And she'd hidden it so well that people would they had no idea. And I think that's, a lot of people just don't know a lot of stuff about mental illness. And I personally haven't wanted to research it because I'm just like, this is my life. I don't want to delve in deeper because there's so much hurt and there's so much pain that comes from having a parent that isn't always there. And it's just, as I said, it's something that I've just recently been able to come to terms with, saying, you know, my mum was mentally ill, but actually thinking about how that's impacted my life, and particularly, you know, going to school. And because I've spent most of my life taking care of my mum, well, most of my adult life, whatever, like 21 years sort of thing. She died when I was 25, so when I was 25. And then when I was little, and my dad kind of was trying to figure everything out. My brother was just like doing whatever he could to, like, you know, stay sane in the house. So my dad kind of, I guess he enlisted me to kind of look after her and just try and help him, you know, try and figure out what was going on, because like no one in Mum's family ever told him anything about her condition. And so he kind of tried and had to like muddle around in the dark. And, you know, with myself and my brother, who's a year older than me, having, you know, 2 kids that are like primary school age, like really young, and you're trying to navigate parenthood combined with, you know, a spouse that's just not all there and just picks fights about random things and all that kind of stuff. I can understand, like, well, I have some understanding of what it, you know, was probably like for my dad. But yeah, so when I started school, and that was, like, I was always an outcast in school. That was, I don't think realistically looking back on my educational experience, that I think just with everything going on at home and just not wanting to be part of the family that I was in, because it was terrifying and I didn't really know what to make of anything that was happening, but I just knew it was my life kind of thing. I don't think I would have been happy at any school that I went to. So I remember my second grade teacher telling my parents that I just wasn't happy there. And so they moved me to a religious school, and that had just been built. This was in 98. And from my account of it, things just went from bad to worse. So, you know, I had a handful of friends there, which was, you know, nice. But for the most part, like, by the time I hit high school, I kind of just shut down, because I wasn't really sure, like, you know, when you spend your, you know, when what you know most how to do is look after someone and be a carer for your own parent, of all things, and then you suddenly go to school and it's like, wait a minute, I have to figure out how to be like a 12 or 13-year-old. Like, how do you do that? I don't understand. And I didn't know how to fit in with other kids, because it's not something you can explain to anyone else that would, like, you know, a lot of people, I think there's still people out there that don't believe mental illness is a thing, which someone who's grown up with it and is like very deeply exposed to it, that's just like, okay, that's just weird for me. But yeah, so for me, school was really, really difficult, socially, more than, I mean, I threw myself into like whatever homework I had to do and just kind of prayed for the best sort of thing. But yeah, I was very isolated. I was very alone and neglected and all those things because, you know, mum needed all the attention to make sure that she was, you know, it's like when you've got like a little kid, like, or someone with a handicap or whatever, like they need more attention than most people or children or whatever would, because you need to kind of keep them okay. You need to make sure that they're okay, so then, you know, you worry about them first and then it comes you. But by the time, you know, mum was sorted out and we'd kind of calmed her down or did whatever, like let her do whatever she had to do to kind of bring her back down to a level that was manageable for everyone, we were just, it was so exhausting. So when I'd go to school, it was almost like a break away from dealing with her. But the thing was, at school, I was, again, a complete outcast. I didn't fit in with anyone there. Like, I wasn't religious enough for the religious kids. That's how I felt anyway. There weren't, like, a couple of the kids were kind of, as my mum would say, worldly. But yeah, it's just like they already had their own groups, kids that they'd grown up with, and there's just nowhere that I really felt comfortable and that really kind of fit, like, that I fit in with. And I was just, yeah, so kind of just every single class was just, especially at the start of high school, like years 7 and 8 were like the worst. And I'd kind of just shut myself down and blocked everything out because there was just so much stuff going on that I felt like I was at breaking point kind of every single day. And the only thing that I could do to kind of keep myself going was just to, like, listen to my music, and whether it's, or like write, or, you know, I became like obsessed with Harry Potter. Which I still kind of am to a degree. But yeah, anything I could do that could just keep me going from day to day, and just, yeah, I mean, I think I was relatively optimistic in like year 7 because it was the start of high school. I'm like, well, that's, you know, things, if I feel like terrible now, or like, you know, if I'm just not fitting in or whatever, then there's always, you know, there's always chance things could get better. And then each year that went by, it was just like, well, this is different, but nothing's really improving. And just, it got consistently harder. And then by the time I was like year 10, which is when I was 15, that was just, I was exhausted. I was just like, you know, me and my best friend were constantly fighting. Everyone in my school, like everyone in my class at school was fighting. It was just, whether it's hormones, I don't know what, and then I'd come home and then I'd fight with my parents, and it was just over, like, mum would start an argument over something that she didn't understand or that she misinterpreted, or, you know, like dad would say, like, you know, if you like making lunch or something in the kitchen, and he'd just be like cutting up chicken rolls or whatever it is that he's doing, and then he'd ask mum to kind of, like, he might ask mum to like move out of the way because the kitchen only has a certain amount of space. And so in mum's mind, what is a simple request for, hey, dad's trying to make lunch, can you not be in the same room because can you just move over to a certain spot so he's got more space to work in? And she would kind of take that as like, you know, you want me to leave this house, like then this marriage is over, something completely just out of whack. And you're just like, and that would result in like a 15-20 minute argument between the two of them. And dad's like, I need to make lunch, there's not enough space, can you go over there please? And mum would just go on a tangent. And this is the kind of environment that I was so familiar with. And I'm just like, well, it sucks, like, immeasurably, and I really hate it, but I don't know, like, what's the alternative? Like, nothing else feels familiar. Yeah, so when I got to, like, year 10, it was getting really, really difficult because I was sick of everything. I wanted to get out, but I was so scared to get out because it's just, you know, when you're it's like going to a different country when you're completely unprepared and know nothing about it. It's just like, what do? You know, like some people like thrive and other people curl up in a fetal position and sob for days and whatever. And I was just, the idea of not having that life was terrifying, but the idea of being in it was something that I didn't want either. So it's like limbo. And so I just kept on with my music and tried to, you know, just pray for daylight basically and just keep that going every single day. But yeah, so I'm just now kind of, as at the start, coming to terms with what it actually means or meant to be a child of a mentally ill parent, because it's something that I've just, like, I've known it for, like, my entire life, but just what that actually means, like, emotionally, psychologically, all those things, and how, I guess, all the stories that I've told myself, I've been told, and everything that I keep repeating, how that's really deeply impacted me, because, like, I've got, I still have dreams of what I want for my life, and, I really hope to get there. And, whether, like, sharing my story is part of it, I don't know, but I'm sure I'm not the only person out there that's either had an experience with a mentally ill parent or someone in their family who just wasn't able to care for them. And, you feel guilt and shame and resentment and sadness for the kind of the life that you never got to have because you spent so much time caring for this person. And then you feel guilt, like, especially in my case, like, mum's now passed on. And so it's just like, you're gone, but I still feel all these things that I never really knew how to process before. And I think just acknowledging as a starting point that, although it's not like, although it sounds like a label, I think it's more just identifying this section of my life story, my life journey, whatever you want to call it, that, being a child of a mentally ill parent, and, a lot of things that mum would say to me when she was having an off day, and she was always very jealous of the relationship that my dad and I have. We're always very close, which is, something that happens that when you dedicate your time looking after someone, you have that person to share experiences with. And it wasn't an ideal position to be in, but you kind of just, you've got to make the most of what you've got at the time. And, Dad said at the start, Dad enlisted me to look after Mum while he was at work. And yeah, so whenever he was kind of taking time out from whether it was work or dealing with Mum, he and I would, like, just talk about whatever. And it was nice to have that. But at the same time, it's just like, there was just, like, this blockage that was, I guess, created by Mum, because she just, I think she just was always paranoid that, like, I was trying to get between her and Dad, and all this kind of weird, crazy stuff, which I'll probably touch on later on in a different video. But yeah, it's just a lot of stuff that she would say to me was very much, it was a conditional love kind of thing. And it's very much like, if you try to fit in with these people, then, I'll give you my love, sort of thing. And, like, she didn't say it, but it was the reaction whenever I came home from school, said, hey, these people are picking on me, or they're not very nice, or whatever. And she was just like, oh, tell them that you don't like it, and they'll stop. And I'm like, realistically, that would maybe work on a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old at best, but that's not something you tell a teenager. That's just not going to work. But yeah, a lot of my upbringing, like, I have this really deep-seated belief and, feelings around not being good enough and not being worthy. And this is, like, something, as I said again, that I'm working on right now, is, like, I never really knew what self-worth was. Like, I'd heard of self-esteem, and I was like, I didn't have that because my mum had very low self-esteem, and I never wanted to be like that. Like, everything that she was, like, all the negative things that she was, I was like, I don't want to be like this. I don't want to be that person that looks in the mirror and, like, looks down on everything and says, my arms are too flabby, I've got too many rolls of fat on my stomach, like, whatever. Like, I didn't want that negativity. But I didn't have, I guess, the tools in my toolbox, whatever you want to call it, to have the high self-esteem. Like, when I looked at myself in the mirror, it was usually just to, like, brush my hair, and I didn't really think anything, I didn't really feel anything. I was just like, I am this being, I exist, maybe I should clean the mirror now, like, that kind of thing. But yeah, so I always consider myself to just not have self-esteem, and it's just like, if someone tried to show me anything nice, it was just like, well, what did I do to deserve this? Like, this is crazy. What do you expect in return from me? And most of the time it was, like, during high school, and I would get to the point oftentimes, like, as I said, like, I was very much an outcast. I just didn't fit in anywhere, so I was just, like, going to school, going through the motions, because pretty sure that was, like, legal for me to do, and I didn't really have anywhere else to go. So I just do that. But then it's just like, you know, what more can you possibly take from me? Like, I deal with mum every single day. She's always like, 1 minute she'll say something and she'll be like really uplifting and like, oh, you know, you look nice in this, and then like 2 seconds later she'll be like, oh, you don't want to stare at yourself too much in the mirror, like, you know, people think you're full of yourself and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just like, so it's like, do you want me to be happy? Are you going to take it away? Like, what's the deal here? So the safest thing for me to do was always just to, I guess, not accept anything, not allow myself to feel happy or receive anything, because it was just a case of, it would be so fleeting. Like, it would come in and suddenly be like, well, actually, you know, you don't deserve to feel like this, so I'm going to take it away from you. So it's like, well, if someone tried to do something nice, I'd kind of just, like, I wouldn't so much reject it, I'd just take it on and kind of just like let it sit at the side going, okay, you've given me this thing, I'm just going to put it over here because I don't know what to do with it. So yeah, so something that I'm still working through at the moment is feelings around worthiness, because I've tried like really hard, like, with, you know, whether it's to do with like career and, you know, wanting to like do something that I love, or, you know, get paid to do something, like, or get paid what I feel like I'm worth getting paid, all the stuff around that, and like, you know, trying to allow myself to receive and all that kind of thing. It's kind of a frustrating sticking point for me, because it's just like, well, I want to be able to, you know, pay my rent and pay my bills and then have a little bit left over at the end to just, you know, or have some, you know, more than a little bit, but like have something left over that I can pay, you know, I can afford things. Like, I don't have to feel guilt or shame or anything. Like, if I want to buy, you know, a fancy handbag or whatever it is, or if I want to, you know, just things that I want to do for myself, and do them without feeling guilty that I'm doing something for myself. Because with, yeah, like growing up with mum, she was very much like, I don't know, it's just anytime I do anything, she'd kind of make me feel like I was selfish for doing it. So, for example, like after my 21st birthday, I was doing an inventory of all the presents that I got, and I wasn't about to say, look, I'm not grateful for this, because, you know, I've always loved getting gifts. That's like actual physical presents, and typically around Christmas or birthdays. And that's because that's what I realized a couple of years ago. That was how I think mum always showed that she loved me, because whenever, like, she would say things that were really mean and hurtful, and then switch back to like the normal loving mother self. And then to kind of make up for whatever she'd said, she'd like buy me some little thing with like a, you know, little cute little magnet or bookmark or some like small gesture. And it was a like just because kind of thing, but it's kind of just like, you know, I'm sorry I said this mean thing. And like, even though she never remembered whenever she said anything mean. And whenever I'd be like, but remember when you said this thing to me? And she's like, oh, like, I don't recall that. And like, you can never tell whether she was just saying it to save face, or whether part of her mind had like legitimately blocked out that memory. So, you know, and yeah, and I remember saying to my dad about a year or so ago, it was sometime after mum died, and I said to him, like, my experience dealing with mum was just like I said earlier, like, it's like having a conversation with her, and then out of nowhere she'll pull like a gun or a knife or some kind of weapon, and she'd inflict it on you, and a second later the weapon would be gone, and she'd be looking at you going, what happened to you? Like, what's going on? Who hurt you? And so you'd be standing there in shock that your own mother would do something so, I guess, drastic or so like hurtful, but she had no recollection of it happening. And so it's like this automatic, like, I kind of have to forgive you because you're my mom, and I know that you would never intentionally do it. Yet I just saw and felt you do this thing like 2 seconds ago, and having to repeat that process on an almost daily basis, because it's, you know, my dad said to me, like, she would just weigh you down. And yeah, like, being around a parent that would say consistently negative things, and it's just like, it would be positive for 1 second, and then she'd be like, oh, by the way, like, and then she'd kind of like take it back in the next instance, or make you feel like, well, this was, it's like being given something and then someone taking it back. And yeah, and so you just be like on a repeating cycle. And then once that was over, you'd go to school and it would be kids like my own age saying things or like picking on me, or like it was just like a war zone. Like home was kind of a nightmare to be in, and school was the lesser of two evils. Like there's always one girl in my class that I remember that would every single day would make my life a living hell. And I found out later on that it was because she had a really bad home life, and I think she called me once, like several years later, after we'd both finished school, and she'd already moved away at that point, and we kind of sort of reconnected, although we were both going through a lot of stuff at the time. And I'm pretty sure she was going through, from memory, I think she was going through a suicide attempt when she called me up in tears, and I could just hear like her breathing. And even though she'd treated me terribly for the time that she was in my life, I was just like, no one deserves to be at that point. Like, there has to be something really going wrong for, and I think she'd been hospitalized a couple of times, and there's so much other stuff that was going on for her. So, and it's, and that's a whole other story. But yeah, so growing up with mum being the way she was, it was difficult because you kind of had to put all your problems aside the minute you walk through the front door. And it didn't matter, like, if I'd spent, like, if I'd started the day at school and, my best friend had, taken off with this girl who was really mean to me. And, if I'd been, like, kind of left alone and other kids had, like, said, been picking on me for various things just because I didn't fit in or whatever it was. And then, yeah, it didn't matter if if every single class that I'd had that day, I was just kind of praying for lunchtime. And when it got to lunchtime, I'd like sit in some corner where I was like, where there was no one around, because I was just like, I can't deal with any more of this. Like, I just need my time out, but there's nowhere else to go. So I'm going to just like sit in this hidey hole and then read my Harry Potter book, and everything can be okay for that like 30, 40 or however long, 30, 40 minutes, however long lunch was. And then you have like one more class, and then there'd be like an hour on the bus trip home. And you walk in the front door, and it didn't matter if I spent lunchtime that day or between classes, a couple of classes that day, reading my Harry Potter book because I just needed to get away from everything, or whether I'd spent that lunchtime, curled up in one of the toilets of school, like bawling my eyes out, because it was just, every single day was kind of like living on 5% battery life, and you kind of you have enough to do what you need to do to get through. You just do the basic functions. You don't commit anything more than you need to, because you just literally don't have that energy. And so, yeah, so it's very, yeah. And then I guess emotionally, because I've always felt so much, and going to school with a bunch of kids that just don't really know how to treat you the right way, or just don't really know what to make of you, or whatever the reasons were that I was treated the way I was. It was just, yeah, it was a nightmare. And then I went home to like a even more difficult nightmare, because it's my mom and it's the family, and that's a lot more like, they're closer to home, but really was closer to home. So that was a challenge in itself. And so I would be there was really no escape. So the only way I could get away from it, aside from could get away from being at home, was being at school. And, the handful of friends that were also kind of outcast in their own way, and did their own thing, that was kind of my, like, it'll be okay. I've got these people here, even if everything else after lunchtime is terrible. And yeah, so that was between lunchtimes and everything else. It was just, yeah. So when I got home at night, or when I got home in the afternoon, my only other escape was a toss-up between music, books, occasionally internet stuff. But that wasn't, like, my internet was dial-up at that stage. So, and it was, yeah, you can't really do much with dial-up. But yeah, my other escape was sleeping. Like, I would just, when it came to the weekends, like, if, you know, I would just do whatever I could to just sleep as long as possible, because that was the only time that everything felt okay, mainly because I couldn't really feel anything, like, unless, you know, the cat was on my bed or whatever. But yeah, so I think emotionally I was kind of, it's like I had a full cup every single day when I went to school. And whenever kids would say things, or, I mean, when I say do things, but it's more they said things, because I went to a really, really small school. And, you know, no one would, like, hit me or do anything. There's nothing really physical. It was more just, yeah, how I felt being in that environment. And as I said, like, I was a shell of a person. I just shut myself off, because when you're, like, it's like having a full cup. And when you're starting off like that, you just kind of need to just do what you have to do. Like, if you're trying to, it's like doing like a, you know, egg race or whatever. Like, you just need to kind of get from A to B and not take anything else on, because it's going to tip over. And the times when, you know, people would kind of throw more negative stuff into that already full cup, and I'd feel like I want to just break down. Those are the days where I would, you know, excuse myself, you know, ask teacher if I can go to the toilet, and I would curl up in one of the bigger toilets on the high school side of the school, and I would just lock myself in there for, you know, if it needed to be the whole of lunch, then it was the whole of lunch, and I just cried for, yeah, like 30 minutes or however long it was, until I felt like, okay, I can get through the next part again. And yeah, and it was just like, if there was so many bad things that were happening, there's so many things that people were saying or doing, or just even just being around people that are like really negative, that was like a huge impact for me. And unfortunately, I kind of live with a lot of that at home. So I'd go from school to home and back again, and then I'd go to church and have a couple of friends there. But they went for Sunday school, which was like probably like the first hour of the morning, and then they went home, and then it was just me with, you know, my brother hung around and whatever. But it was just, yeah, so I didn't have a lot of external places to go. But yeah, so, well, that, like, yeah, so that's kind of an introductory, well, overwhelming introductory of my story. And yeah, something that I'm still working through. I've been dealing with a therapist to like talk through all this stuff. And I saw one for about 6 years, and I've just started seeing someone new like the start of this year, because I wanted to, you know, have a change of pace and just try different modalities, and she's been fantastic so far, which is great. She's really helped me deal with a lot of inner child stuff, because, you know, when you spend most of your childhood is not only traumatic, you know, dealing with a parent that's kind of volatile mentality, but also, yeah, it's just like my childhood was, you know, torn between caring for my mother's needs and, you know, playing with Barbies and watching, you know, whatever, like listening to Britney songs, whatever it was, you know, Disney movies, that kind of stuff. It wasn't consistently like just a fun time, which, I mean, you know, a lot of stuff happens in childhood, whatever, but it was, yeah, like I had to be, and this is one of the things which is a bigger challenge when I got to high school, is, you know, I had to be my own everything kind of thing. Like, you know, when mum was resting off her medication in the afternoon when I got home, it's just me by myself. So whatever issues that came up at school, I've been writing I've had a diary since I was about 13, 12. Yeah, I started writing in a diary just after I was diagnosed with scoliosis when I was about 12, and just before my first spinal surgery when I was 13. And so I've kind of, to this day, I think I've got like, I want to say 15 diaries. I haven't checked, I haven't recounted in a while, but I've kind of kept a diary because that was really my only outlet for everything that was going on. Like, I mean, I could try to talk to Dad about certain things, but then, you know, being, you know, when you become an angsty teenager and he's trying to like make sense of everything that's going on, and he's kind of, you know, stuck there as well. It's just, a lot of stuff that I wrote was about my anger towards my parents and how I was kind of stuck in this situation that I didn't know how to get out of. So it's just like, you know, writing became what another part of my survival toolkit sort of thing. So, but yeah, so that's kind of a introduction. I just thought I'd share because I've kind of been looking around for groups, mainly in my local area in Sydney. And yeah, so I just figured I may as well post it because it's me starting to come to terms with that part of my life and everything that I kind of went through. And I'm like convinced that there's other people out there. Like, I'm not the only person that's experienced this kind of thing. And, you know, and I was also inspired by Nikki Ayres, if you want to check her out, who posted about her battle with how she's coping with bipolar and mental illness and that kind of thing. And, you know, just thought, you know what, like, if she can post a video about that, then I can post a video about, you know, being a child of a mentally ill parent. So yeah, so that's kind of an introduction to what my childhood and upbringing and everything was like. Yeah, I might post another video later on about a different aspect of it or whatever, but it's a starting point anyway. So yeah, there you go.